Neal, a small town in northern Illinois with a population of just over 15,000 people, was known for its traditional values and close-knit community. Located 120 miles from Chicago, the town maintained the atmosphere of a typical American suburb from the late 90s. It had 3 elementary schools, 1 high school, a public library, and numerous churches of various denominations. The Mongan family lived in a 2-story house on Oak Street, one of the most respectable streets in town. Their Victorian-style home, built in the early 20th century, stood out with its well-maintained garden and white fence. Camilla Mongan had worked at the town library for the past 15 years, advancing from an entry-level position to become the head of the children's department. Colleagues described Camilla as a responsible and punctual employee. She organized weekly reading sessions for children, participated in town educational programs, and ran the summer reading club. In the St. Patrick's Church community, where the Mongan family had been parishioners for more than 20 years, Camilla was known as an active participant in charitable initiatives. David Mongan, a retired military serviceman with 25 years of service, worked as a security consultant for a private company. His job required frequent business trips across the country, which eventually began to affect their family relationships. The Mongans' 3 children, Michael, 21 years old, Sarah, 18 years old, and James, 15 years old, were well known in town for their academic and athletic achievements. By the fall of 1999, people began noticing the first strange behaviors in the family. Camilla started appearing less frequently at community events and often looked troubled. Neighbors noted David's frequent late-night departures and returns, which were unusual for his typical work schedule. At the library, colleagues noticed that Camilla began making mistakes in documentation, which was previously uncharacteristic of her. A week before the tragic events, Camilla consulted with family attorney Robert Higgins regarding property division matters. She also withdrew a significant amount from her personal account and took out a new life insurance policy, naming her children as the sole beneficiaries. These actions would later become important evidence in the investigation of her murder. The story of David Mongan and Alexa Newman's affair began in March 1998 during a security conference in Miami. Alexa, owner of the successful consulting firm Newman Securities, was presenting a report on new technologies in corporate security. After her presentation, David approached her to discuss potential collaboration, and this business meeting evolved into a personal relationship. Alexa Newman, a 39-year-old businesswoman, had built her company from scratch over 10 years. A Princeton graduate, she possessed a sharp mind and business acumen. Her firm, specializing in security systems, had offices in 3 states and an annual turnover of more than $20 million. While outwardly successful and independent, Alexa concealed deep psychological issues related to control and manipulation. Over the next 6 months, David regularly flew to Florida under the pretext of business meetings. Alexa arranged their meetings to appear as professional consultations. She rented offices in different cities, created fictitious contracts, maintaining the appearance of legitimate business activity. In reality, the couple spent time in luxury hotels and private villas. By the end of 1998, Alexa began showing signs of obsessive attachment. She called David several times a day and sent gifts to his children despite his requests not to do so. In January 1999, she announced her pregnancy, though it later turned out to be a lie. In March, she staged a cancer diagnosis using forged medical documents. David, realizing the seriousness of the situation, attempted to end the relationship in April 1999. In response, Alexa began blackmailing him, threatening to reveal their affair to Camilla and his employers. She hired a private investigator to monitor the Mongan family, collecting information about their daily lives. During this period, she began keeping a diary where she detailed her fantasies about a life with David after removing obstacles. In June 1999, David finally returned to his family, cutting off all contact with Alexa. He confessed his infidelity to Camilla, and the couple began seeing a family therapist. However, Alexa did not accept this decision. She continued to stalk David, sending anonymous letters to his wife and employers. Her diary began to contain the first entries about plans for Camilla's physical elimination. After the final break in her relationship with David, Alexa Newman's mental state rapidly deteriorated. She began seeing a psychotherapist under a false name, complaining of depression and obsessive thoughts. Records from these sessions, later seized by investigators, showed that Alexa was in a state of deep emotional crisis but concealed the true reasons for her condition. In July 1999, Alexa began developing a plan to murder Camilla. She used her company's resources to gather information about Mrs. Mongan's daily schedule, travel routes, and places she regularly visited. For this purpose, she hired 2 private investigators, telling them she was investigating a case of corporate fraud. Eden Malone, a former security officer at Newman Securities, became a key figure in implementing the plan. Eden had been dismissed from the company for exceeding her authority but maintained loyalty to Alexa, who had helped cover up the scandal surrounding her dismissal. Using Eden's financial difficulties and criminal connections, Alexa offered her $50,000 to organize Camilla's murder. Eden Malone brought in 2 perpetrators, Marcus Reed and John Dawson, small-time criminals from Chicago. They were each promised payment of $15,000. Alexa insisted that the murder should look like a robbery gone wrong. She provided detailed information about the Mongan house's security system and local police schedules. Throughout August and September 1999, the criminals conducted several rehearsals of the planned murder. They visited Neil 3 times to observe the Mongan house. Alexa rented an apartment for them in a neighboring town under the guise of a company office. She also purchased a used car, registered under a fake name, which was planned to be used on the day of the murder. Alexa attempted to disguise the financial trail of the crime preparation to a complex scheme of transfers between various business accounts. She created a fictitious consulting firm in Delaware, through which payments to the perpetrators were processed. Investigators would later discover that a month before the murder, she had withdrawn more than $100,000 in cash using various ATMs in Florida and Georgia. By late September 1999, the plan was fully ready for execution. Alexa chose October 4th, knowing that David would be on a business trip to California that day, providing him with a perfect alibi. She also made sure the Mongan children would be at school or in activities during the planned attack. October 4th, 1999 began as a typical Monday in Neil. Camilla Mongan arrived at the library at 8:30 in the morning, as recorded by surveillance cameras. During the day, she conducted 2 children's reading sessions and participated in a meeting planning the fall book fair. At 4:45 in the afternoon, she left the library, noting her departure time in the registration log. According to neighbor testimonies, a white Ford Taurus, later identified as the criminal's vehicle, was spotted parked on a neighboring street from 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Marcus Reed and John Dawson were in the car, waiting for Camilla's return. Eden Malone coordinated their actions by phone from a motel located 20 miles from the crime scene. At 5:10 in the evening, Camilla parked her car in the garage. Recordings from a neighbor's security cameras showed that 3 minutes after her arrival, 2 men approached the Mongan house. They were dressed in utility worker uniforms and carried tools, which didn't raise suspicions among casual witnesses. The medical examiner determined the time of death between 5:15 and 5:30 in the evening. The perpetrators entered the house through the back door using lockpicks. Camilla was caught by surprise in the kitchen while preparing dinner. According to the coroner's report, she received multiple blunt force trauma wounds to the head. The murder weapon was an adjustable wrench, which the criminals took with them. At the crime scene, forensics experts found signs of a struggle. An overturned chair, broken dishes, and blood traces on the walls and floor. The examination showed that Camilla had tried to defend herself. Skin particles from her attacker were found under her fingernails, which later became important evidence in the case. At 5:45 in the evening, the Mongan's youngest son, James, returned home from football practice and discovered his mother's body. He immediately called 911. The recording of this call, lasting 4 minutes and 23 seconds, was later used in court as evidence that the teenager was not involved in the crime. The first patrol car arrived at the scene at 5:52 in the evening. Officers secured the crime scene and began interviewing neighbors. At 6:15 in the evening, the investigation team arrived, led by Detective Michael Brown. By this time, the house had been cordoned off, and crime scene investigators and the medical examiner had arrived. During the initial crime scene examination, investigators determined that nothing valuable had been stolen from the house, contradicting the robbery theory. All of Camilla's jewelry remained untouched, as did the cash in her purse. This fact led detectives to suspect from the beginning that the staged robbery was an attempt to conceal the true motive for the murder. The investigation into Camilla Mongden's murder was led by veteran detective Michael Brown, who had 23 years of experience in the Violent Crimes Division. Initially, investigators pursued three main theories: a robbery gone wrong, a murder motivated by personal animosity, and a contract killing. A turning point in the investigation came with the discovery of DNA under the victim's fingernails. Analysis conducted at the Illinois State Crime Laboratory revealed genetic material belonging to Marcus Reed, who had a previous conviction for armed robbery. His DNA profile was already in law enforcement databases. Parallel to analyzing physical evidence, investigators examined the Mongden family's phone records. They discovered a series of calls from unknown numbers to the victim's home phone during the month before the murder. All calls were made from disposable phones purchased in Florida. Detectives also uncovered an unusual pattern in David Mongden's business trips over the previous 2 years. When questioning David, investigators encountered his reluctance to discuss his business contacts in Florida. However, after being presented with evidence of his extramarital affair with Alexa Newman, he began cooperating with the investigation. His testimony helped establish the connection between Alexa and the company through which payments to the murderers were processed. A crucial phase of the investigation involved examining Alexa Newman's financial transactions. Investigators uncovered a series of suspicious cash withdrawals and transfers through shell companies. Particular attention was drawn to a fictitious consulting firm in Delaware, to which $100,000 had passed shortly before the murder. Court-authorized wiretapping of Alexa's phone conversations revealed her contacts with Eden Milan. In one conversation recorded a week after the murder, they discussed the need to dispose of the tools. This phrase, according to investigators, referred to the murder weapon, which was never found. Detectives also established the connection between Eden Milan and the murder perpetrators through analysis of surveillance camera footage from the motel where she stayed on the day of the crime. Cameras recorded her meeting with Reed and Dawson the day before the murder. Evidence of all three suspects' presence was found in the motel room, including fingerprints and clothing fibers. By the end of the first month of investigation, investigators had gathered sufficient evidence to charge all participants in the crime. A crucial role was played by testimony from a gas station attendant who identified Reed and Dawson from photographs. He confirmed seeing them on the day of the murder fueling a white Ford Taurus, which was later found burned in Chicago's industrial zone. The arrests of suspects began on November 15, 1999, as part of a carefully planned operation. Marcus Reed and John Dawson were the first to be apprehended in their apartment in Chicago's South Side. During the search, police discovered part of the murder payment money and a notebook containing Eden Milan's contact information. Dawson, under pressure from evidence and facing life imprisonment, agreed to cooperate with investigators within 48 hours of his arrest. His testimony became key to understanding the entire chain of events. He detailed each participant's role in the crime and revealed specifics about the murder preparation, including several preliminary trips to Neal to observe the Mongden house. Eden Milan was arrested on November 17 at Miami Airport while attempting to leave the country. She was found with a fake passport and tickets to Brazil. During her first interrogation, she denied involvement in the murder, but after being presented with phone recording evidence and Dawson's testimony, she began giving confessional statements. Milan's confession proved especially valuable as she had kept detailed records of all contacts with Alexa Newman. She had preserved text messages, emails, and even audio recordings of meetings where crime details were discussed. She had secretly collected these materials as insurance for herself, understanding she might become a scapegoat if the plan failed. Alexa Newman was arrested on November 20 in her Florida office. By this time, Investigators had irrefutable evidence of her involvement in organizing the murder. A search of her home uncovered a personal diary containing records of murder planning, fake pregnancy and cancer documents, and photographs of the Mongan family taken by hired detectives. David Mongan's reaction to Alexa's arrest was captured by local television cameras. He was at the police station giving additional testimony when he learned the news. The footage shows him sinking into a chair and covering his face with his hands, realizing the scale of the tragedy his actions had led to. During subsequent interrogations, it was revealed that Alexa had meticulously documented the development of her plan. Investigators found a folder on her computer labeled Project Freedom, containing detailed instructions for the perpetrators, money movement schemes, and even alternative murder scenarios. She had also maintained a list of potential suspects she planned to frame in case of an investigation. Particularly shocking for investigators was the discovery of a collection of David's personal items in Alexa's home, including his military medals, family photographs, and even clothing items she had stolen during their meetings. In her bedroom, she had created a sort of shrine with David's photographs, demonstrating the depth of her obsession. The trial of those involved in Camilla Mongan's murder began on March 15, 2000, in the Illinois Circuit Court. The prosecution decided to try the defendants separately, beginning with the direct perpetrators of the crime. Marcus Reed, who had refused to plead deal, was the first to stand trial. Reed's trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of his guilt, including DNA analysis, witness testimony, and surveillance camera footage. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before reaching a guilty verdict. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. John Dawson, who had agreed to cooperate with investigators, received a more lenient sentence, 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. His testimony played a crucial role in convicting the other participants in the crime. In his final statement, he apologized to the Mongan family, although David and the children declined to attend his hearing. The trial of Eden Milan drew significant media attention. As a former security officer and the primary organizer of the murder, she possessed the most comprehensive information about the crime's planning. Her testimony about the methodical preparation of the murder and Alexa Newman's role shocked the jury. Milan received 40 years in prison. The culmination of the legal proceedings was Alexa Newman's trial, which began in June 2000. The prosecution presented more than 300 pieces of evidence and called 45 witnesses. The pages from her personal diary, where she detailed her fantasies about Camilla's death and future life with David, made a particular impression on the jury. Alexa's defense was built on claims of mental instability caused by obsessive ideas and emotional dependency. However, psychiatric evaluation determined that she was fully aware of her actions while planning the crime. After a 3-week trial, the jury found her guilty on all counts. Judge Robert Henderson, in delivering Alexa's sentence, noted the exceptional cruelty and cold-bloodedness with which the murder was planned. He sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole and ordered her to pay $5 million in compensation to the Mongan family. The entire Mongan family was present during the sentencing. David, speaking on behalf of the family, stated, "No punishment will bring Camilla back to us, but today's sentence gives us the opportunity to begin the healing process. We are grateful to the justice system for ensuring all those responsible receive their deserved punishment." The Camilla Mongan murder case left a profound impact on all its participants and the history of Neil. After the conclusion of the trials, the Mongan family sold their house and moved to another state, seeking to start a new life away from the scene of the tragedy. David left his work in security and dedicated himself to public service, giving lectures about domestic violence and the consequences of marital infidelity. The Mongan children coped with their mother's loss in different ways. The eldest son, Michael, graduated from law school and became a prosecutor specializing in violent crimes. Sarah created the Camilla Mongan Charitable Foundation, helping children from disadvantaged families access education. The youngest son, James, who directly witnessed the aftermath of the tragedy, underwent extensive psychological rehabilitation and became a child psychologist. The Neil Public Library, where Camilla worked, established an annual literary prize in her name for young authors. The children's reading room was renamed in her honor, and the memorial plaque was installed with her photograph and a description of her contributions to developing children's reading in the town. The convicted participants in the crime faced various fates in the prison system. Marcus Reed was killed by another inmate in 2005. John Dawson continues serving his sentence, participating in rehabilitation programs, and speaking to youth about the consequences of criminal behavior. Eden Milan wrote a book about her involvement in the crime, but the court banned its publication. Alexa Newman is serving her life sentence in a maximum security women's prison in Florida. According to prison administration reports, she continues to claim she acted out of love for David. All her appeals have been rejected by the court. Her company, Newman Securities, was sold to competitors, with the proceeds going toward compensation for the Mongan family. The Camilla Mongan case led to changes in Illinois state legislation regarding stalking and domestic violence. Camilla's law was passed, increasing penalties for stalking and mandating psychiatric evaluation for defendants in similar crimes. The Illinois Police Academy uses materials from this case as a teaching example in detective training. Special attention is paid to methods of identifying contract killings disguised as other crimes and the importance of thoroughly examining financial trails in investigating serious crimes. Today, at St. Patrick's Church, an annual memorial service is held in memory of Camilla Mongan. These services are attended not only by community members, but by people from across the state, honoring the memory of a woman whose tragic story became a symbol in the fight against domestic violence and stalking.